Take it away. Go.
Hello, and welcome to our session, Plant-Rich Diet, a Delicious Climate Solution. I'd like to begin our session by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Wurrung, Heri, Boy, Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders, past and present, and to elders of all First Nation communities from where you may be joining us today. My name is Ambaree, and I am a member of the Rotary Club of Marina City, Singapore. I'm also the co-chair of the Plant-Rich Diet Task Force, which falls under the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. With an urgent existential crisis that we face today, it might seem like bold, tough, and large-scale decisions and actions need to be taken by governments and policymakers around the world to solve it. But do you know that the most powerful solution that can fight a calamity like climate change lies not in the hand of anybody else but ourselves. It actually lies on our dinner plates. Today we have two wonderful speakers with us, Phillip Wollen and Dr. Mackay. I'd like to introduce Phillip Wollen first. Phillip Wollen is a past Vice President of Citibank. He has been awarded the Order of Australia and Australian of the Year. He supports 500 projects in 40 countries for children, animals, the environment, and the terminally ill. He has delivered speeches in European Parliament Brussels, the Parliament in the Hub, Israeli Knesset Parliament in Jerusalem, Parliament of the World Religions in Melbourne. His speech, Get Animals Off the Menu, in the Melbourne Town Hall went viral, seen by over 32 million people, translated in more than 21 languages. Before I welcome Phillip over here, I'd like to just say that Phillip is a personal inspiration to me. He has not just inspired me, but millions of people around the world. He has inspired me to be courageous, to speak the truth, which might not be the popular truth, but just speak it anyway. And I'm very, very happy that he could be a part of this session today. Phillip.
Thank you, Ambaree. Can everybody hear me back there? I think I might have lost a little bit of my voice today. King Lear, late at night on cliffs, asks the blind Earl of Gloucester, "How do you see the world?" And the blind man Gloucester replies, "I see it feelingly. And shouldn't we all?" Rudyard Kipling, writing of young men who died in World War II. "And if they ask you why we died, tell them that our fathers lied." That legacy of lies continues today. You see, the world is crying out today for only two things, leadership and the truth. Today, I'm simply going to tell you the truth. The wise Chinese have a term for it, Zhengjiao. Listen to the friend who tells you the truth, even when it hurts. So let's just tell the truth, fearlessly and forcefully. That is what the Sanskrit word satyagraha means, the truth force. Now, Brendan Kelly in the book of Judas wrote, "If you want to serve your age, betray it." But what's that mean, to betray your age? It means expose its lies, humiliate its conceits, debunk its arrogance, and condemn them to face harsher truths. Alvin Toffler said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Now, there was a time when my favourite food was filet mignon and lobster, a fact for which I'm so profoundly ashamed today. So what made me, as a young merchant banker, decide to give away everything I owned with warm hands and die broke? What made me decide to do that? To leave the world of lobsters and Learjets in exchange for shelters and slaughterhouses. To take nothing but pictures, own nothing but memories, leave nothing but footprints, kill nothing but time. You see, something happened to me. I had been to Dante's Inferno, but unlike Dante Alighieri, I did not have Beatrice for my love or Virgil for my guide. I heard the screams of my dying father as his body was ravaged by the many cancers that killed him. And I realized I'd heard those screams before. In the slaughterhouse, on the cattle ships to the Middle East, and a dying mother whale in Antarctica as a harpoon explodes in her brain as she calls out to her calf. Their cries were the cries of my father. They were identical. And I discovered that when we suffer as equals. And in their capacity to suffer, a dog is a pig, is a bear, is a boy. So when I look into your faces here tonight, I think of the Greek poet Horace. Change the name, and only the name, and my story is also about you. So as Ambaree says, today we support about 500 projects in 40 countries. So I won't show you my pictures because I know it will break your heart. In China, 7,000 magnificent moon bears, their limbs torn off the traps, are imprisoned in steel coffins welded shut. For 26 years, the bears go insane. And the bile is drained into a bucket which the Chinese drink. In Korea, dogs are beat to death in the marketplace because Korean butchers believe that fear, pain, and suffering makes the meat tasty. In Australia, we kill 90 million kangaroos who adorn our coat of arms, the largest land animal slaughter on the planet. And we send billions of our animals born on Australian soil on death ships to the Middle East, where their eyes are stabbed out and their tendons are slashed. And we treat the ocean as like a public pantry and as a toilet. The Pacific gyre now is so full of plastic junk and human feces, it has created a floating footprint bigger than India. Dolphins and whales are stabbed to death in the shallows of Japan and the Faroe Islands. Huge bays are blood red. 100 million sharks are torn from the sea, their fins hacked off, and their bodies thrown overboard to die agonizing deaths for shark fin soup. And factory farms spew chemicals into the ocean, creating hypoxic dead zones of 1 million square kilometers, killing coral, plants, and ocean animals. And so-called unviable dairy calves who cannot be sold for veal are killed by farmers by smashing in their skulls or jumping on their rib cages and crushing their hearts. And billions of bouncy little chicks are ground up alive in mechanical mincers and or suffocated simply because they are male. Now, the great astrophysicist Carl Sagan, and perhaps you can put up the slide.
You can advance the mouse, roll it if you like. Next slide, yeah, there you go.
The astrophysicist Carl Sagan has a photograph from the Voyager spacecraft. He called it Planet Earth, which is actually a tiny dot in space, lost in the cloud of galaxies. And he described it as this: our beautiful home, our pale blue dot, suspended on a sunbeam. What an arresting, captivating, enchanting thought. Our pale blue dot, our home, suspended on a sunbeam. Well, today, our pale blue dot, our home, suspended on that sunbeam, where we live, we humans comprise 30% of the biomass of all land animals. Animals in slaughterhouses account for 66%. And wild animals living freely in nature are exterminated down to only 4%. 70% of the birds, descendants of the dinosaurs, are imprisoned in cages awaiting slaughter. We have turned Carl Sagan's beautiful pale blue planet Earth into blood-stained planet slaughterhouse. Now, in human history, only 100 billion human beings have ever lived. 7.5 billion people are alive today. And we humans torture and kill 2 billion sentient, living, loving animals every week. We stab and suffocate 1 billion ocean animals every 8 hours. If we were killed at the same rate, we'd be wiped out in 1 weekend. Trillions of fish are ground up into pellets to feed the livestock. Vegetarian cows are now the world's largest ocean predators. The oceans are dying in our time. In this generation, all our fisheries will be dead, the lungs and the arteries of the earth. And oceans sequester more CO2 than all the forests of the world put together. 10,000 entire species are wiped out every year because of the actions of one species, us. And we now face the 6th mass extinction in cosmological history. If any other organism did this, a biologist would call it a virus. It is a crime of unimaginable proportions. Now, Victor Hugo said there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. But I say there is nothing more destructive than a bad idea whose time has passed. The time for meat has passed. And this is not just about animal rights. It's actually about human wrongs. This is the greatest social justice issue since the abolition of slavery. It is a revolutionary event more powerful than the Industrial Revolution, the Reformation, the Hubble telescope, or anything ever conceived by Galileo, Copernicus, Einstein, Darwin, or Freud. Because it protects the most precious of all things, life. Veganism is on the right side of history. We are creating a new enlightenment, the second Renaissance. Happily, the world is changing. 20 years ago, Twitter was a bird sound. www was a stuck keyboard. Cloud was in the sky. Skype was a typo. 4G was a parking space. Google was a baby's burp. And Al-Qaeda was my plumber. Now, the most beautiful word ever written at any time, in any language, in any country in human history came from India 3,000 years ago. Ahimsa, non-violence to any living being. So to be truly ethical, by definition, we must be vegan. Not because veganism describes our nationality, our politics, our religion, our diet, or our lifestyle, but because it describes our character. The anthropologist Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a few committed people can change the world. Indeed, that is the only thing that ever has." Can we do it? There are only 13 million Jews in the world, but they play such a vibrant role in international affairs. Look at the number of Nobel Prizes they win every year. My wife and I sat in the stadium during the Olympic Games full of pride, as Australia won more medals than every country in the world, except for the United States and Russia. Tibet's population is only 3 million, but who hasn't heard about the plight of the Tibetans? The population of Ukraine is only 40 million. There are only 12 million Uyghurs in China, 6 million Syrian refugees, 1 million Rohingyas in China. We listen to these small voices of the Ukrainians, the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, Syrians, and the Rohingya. We listen intently, and there are not many of them. But there are over 600 million vegetarians and vegans in the world. And they are bigger than the United States, England, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Israel, all put together. If they were one nation, they would be bigger than the 27 nations of the European Union. They are bigger than NATO. They are bigger than OPEC. They are bigger than the 11 nations of ASEAN. Bigger than the 29 nations of Latin America and the Caribbean combined. They're bigger than WANA, the 25 nations of West Asia and North Africa combined. They're bigger than the 22 Arab nations combined. They're bigger than the old Warsaw Pact countries, including the old USSR, combined. And they are bigger than the 4,000 religions in the world, excluding Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, combined. And despite this massive demographic footprint, we are still drowned out by the raucous hunting, shooting, killing cartels who believe that violence is the answer when it should not even be a question. You see, animals are not just other species, they are other nations, and we murder them at our own peril. The historian Barbara Tuchman defined folly as acting against our own best interests. That's folly. And Occam's razor, named after the 14th century Jesuit priest, says, when presented with a number of solutions to a problem, the simplest one is always the best. So let's apply these tests to the meat and dairy industry. Forest depletion by these industries costs 3 times as much as the global financial crisis. Zoonotic diseases from factory farms now threaten the Black Death, a pandemic to rival the Black Death, which wiped out half of Europe. And meat and dairy is killing us with cancers, heart disease, and diabetes. Medicare has already bankrupted the United States. They would need $8 trillion invested in treasury bills just to pay the interest, and they've got precisely 0. They could shut down every school, university, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Homeland Security, FBI, and CIA, and they still not have enough money to pay the bill. And antimicrobial resistance, caused by the antibiotics when put into meat, will kill 100 million people and cost the global economy $100 trillion. And that's just the resistance from antibiotics. And you would know that water is the new oil. Nations will soon be going to war over it. Underground aquifers that took millions of years to fill are now running dry. As a young Boy Scout, I drilled my first well and we struck sweet water at 80 feet. Today at an orphanage nearby that I built, we're 800 feet and we're sucking mud. And in China, at 3,000 feet, the drill head is still dry. The mighty Colorado River, the Rio Grande, the Euphrates, and the Yellow Rivers now no longer reach the sea, sucked dry by the meat and dairy industry, whilst 4 billion people suffer from water scarcity. So why do I speak to you about water? Because it takes 15,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilo of beef. It takes 1,000 liters of water to produce 1 liter of milk. And a dairyman makes 28 cents a liter for it. What a preposterously stupid industry. Today, 1 billion people are hungry. 20 million people will die this year from malnutrition. Cutting meat by only 10% will feed 100 million people, and eliminating meat will end starvation forever. And food prices are skyrocketing. It used to cost me for Thai rice for my projects in Southeast Asia $197 a ton, and then it went up to $1,015, a 5-fold increase in 5 months. And poor countries sell their grain to the West for hard currency, whilst their own children starve in their arms. And the West feeds it to livestock. So we can eat a steak. I bet I'm not the only one in this room who thinks this is a crime. Believe me, every morsel of meat we eat is slapping the tear-stained face of a hungry child. When I look into her eyes, do I remain silent? If everyone ate a Western diet, we would need 5 planet Earths to feed us. We've only got one, and she is dying. The Earth can produce enough food for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. And greenhouse pollution from livestock vastly exceeds that of transport, cars, trains, buses, ships, lorries, the lot. And their methane is 20 times more potent than CO2. The Himalayan ice fields, correctly called the third pole, irrigate half the world's population through the Ganges, the Indus, the Brahmaputra, the Yangtze, the Irrawaddy, the Mekong, and the other rivers. And these glaciers are melting fast. I presented these numbers in a speech to 2,000 wealthy Indians in New Delhi, including Amartya Sen, who had just won India's Nobel Prize in Economics. And I mentioned to Muhammad Yunus after he won the Nobel Peace Prize that all the good that he had done would vanish when Bangladesh drowns, to say nothing about Manila, Mumbai, Calcutta, Ho Chi Minh City, and Bangkok. Then we had dinner with Al Gore, and I gave him the same numbers. And more recently, I gave a speech here in Melbourne with Dr. Peter Doherty, who won Australia's Nobel Prize in Medicine. No arguments from all these wonderful Nobel Prize winners, but lots of arguments from the disgusting meat and dairy lobby. So, Upton Sinclair was right. It is impossible to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. And we freak out when 1,000 refugees arrive on our shores. Imagine greenhouse gas emissions hitting 500 parts per million, or a 3-degree temperature rise, creating 1 billion eco-refugees. This calamity will reshape the geopolitical landscape forever. We spoke to Admiral Denny McGinn, who's the chief of US warfighting requirements, and he said, "We have learned that nations will raid and invade long before they starve. We are facing the perfect storm. If any nation had developed weapons that could wreak such havoc on the planet, we would launch a preemptive military strike and bomb it back into the Bronze Age. But we can't, because it is not a rogue state. It's an industry. The good news is we don't have to bomb it. We can just stop buying it." So George Bush was wrong. The axis of evil does not run through Iraq, Iran, or North Korea. It runs through our dining tables. Weapons of mass destruction are our knives and forks, and increasingly nowadays, our chopsticks. See, the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. This vile industry will end because we run out of excuses. I say that veganism is the Swiss Army knife of an ethical future. One instrument solves our ethical, economic, environmental, and health problems and ends animal cruelty forever. And farmers are the ones with the most to gain. Farming won't end, it would boom. Only the product line would change. Farmers would make so much money they wouldn't even bother counting it. I addressed the World Parliament of Religions, and I spoke about peace. And I said that the peace map is drawn on a menu. Peace is not just the absence of war, it is the presence of justice. Justice must be blind to race, color, religion, and to species. If it is not blind, it will be used as a weapon of terror, and there is unimaginable terror in those ghastly gulags we call factory farms. So talking about peace while still killing animals is like loving literature and burning books. They are mutually exclusive ideas. They are incompatible in the same way that science is incompatible with the Flat Earth Society. So, in my journey through Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, I've learned that a man is measured not by how much money he makes, but by how much of it he's willing to give away. particularly to strangers. And if you wish to increase a man's share of happiness, do not aim to increase his possessions, simply decrease his desires. Socrates and Epicurus were right. The unexamined life is not worth living. It's not a life, it's a life sentence. And my heart resonates to the poet W.H. Auden. If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. Martin Luther King said, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it polite? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? Is killing right? Now I speak to audiences, sometimes small groups like this, sometimes 5,000 people, and they're all good, caring, loving, decent people who all want to change the world, as long as they don't have to change themselves. But life does not work that way. First we change in our hearts, and then the world follows. True leaders must face their own demons courageously. Martin Niemöller, the German philosopher, priest, and U-boat captain, spent 8 years in prison for condemning German intellectuals for being cowards. And he wrote, when the Nazis came for the communists, I remained silent. I was not a communist. When they locked up the Democrats, I remained silent. I was not a Democrat. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out. I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I remained silent. I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. Men and women of integrity must speak out and act courageously. Is it not better to light a candle than to curse the darkness? All the darkness in the world cannot put out the light of a single candle. You see, I believe another world is possible. And on a quiet night, I can hear her breathing. The last sentence of Scott Fitzgerald's book, The Great Gatsby, reads, so we beat on, boats against the tide, drawn back ceaselessly into the past. I ask you, are we to live forever in a sick, smug and cruel past? Let's not relive history. Let's make history, because that is what leaders do. They make history. Judge White's closing words in The Bonfire of Vanities were these: the law is humanity's first attempt at decency. So I ask you to join the battle in a war that decency cannot afford to lose. Because in the end, only three things matter: how deeply you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things that were not meant for you. Killing animals was not meant for you. Our animal cousins have survived millions of years of evolution. They've earned the right to share this planet with us in peace, and they have waited long enough. The brutes and the bullies have been Goliath, but David is coming. Maybe he's in this room. Maybe he's one of you. And if not you, who? And if not now, when? Thank you all for being here.
Our job before you today is to transition to our next speaker. Appreciate our two speakers that are right here from Melbourne. Thank you again, Phillip. I'm Scott Nelson. I'm from the Rotary Club of Ann Arbor North. That's in Michigan, USA. There are now actually 8 billion of us on the earth, and we do have this one thing in common. We all eat. My club, the Rotary Club of Ann Arbor North, gave birth to the Plant-Rich Diet Task Force within the Climate Action Team of the SRAG. And it's quickly, as we looked around for global Rotarians to work with us, has grown into an international entity, as evidenced by my co-chair, Ambaree Majumder from Singapore. Our closing slide will show you our team. Plant-rich diets, along with reducing food waste, are the top 2 solutions for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, according to Project Drawdown. Plant-rich diets are the centerpiece of lifestyle as medicine, which is calculated by to effectively treat 80% of global chronic disease. One of my tasks here today is to just show you how plant-rich diets fit the 4-way test. And of course, Phillip led off with a statement about that he was going to tell us the truth. So ask yourselves, is it the truth? The papers that you hold in your hand are a couple of position papers where we've done meta-analysis. Ambaree and I co-authored a couple of position papers, and you can read through those, and they really kind of get to the actual data on it. And I think by the end of the hour, you'll find out that plant-rich diets fit the 4-way test like a glove. That slide is up on our website, and you can go through that on your own time. The position paper, one of the position papers that you'll hold in your hand has that diagram in it. It not only articulates the data supporting the solution, but it proposes a global coalition to do the job with several of the same partners as Polio Plus. The diagram here illustrates that plant-rich diets are the convergence of both climate-safe lifestyle and lifestyle as medicine. Our task force produced a 15-day plant-rich diet challenge. You have a flyer for that, consisting of daily emails, 15 video presentations, a cookbook, and a starter kit. It was originated in October of 2021, and it's given new life in October 2022, and we relaunched it again on Earth Day 2023. I'm challenging you to take the challenge. I've been vegan for 30 years, and you might want to try it for 15 days. We've had many people respond to say that after 15 days, they're done. They're just going to stay right with it. I'm 67 years old, and my primary care physician told me that I don't need to come back for an annual visit. My plant-rich diet, he was concerned about my iron, and he said my blood is so good, my blood work is so good, that I just simply don't need to go back to him. Could Rotary be the engine of education leading the world in eating plants and planting trees? I think the answer is yes. Imagine Rotary. I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Mackay, Malcom Mackay. He's a general practitioner and lifestyle medicine specialist. He's board certified lifestyle medicine physician and fellow of the Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine. He has a graduate diploma in human nutrition. He has special interest in preventing, treating, and reversing chronic disease with a whole food plant-based diet and other lifestyle interventions. Dr. Mackay.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to speak about a health practitioner's perspective on plant-based nutrition. Plant-based nutrition is the most readily available solution to the dual crises of global chronic disease pandemic and the climate and environmental emergency. During my talk, I'll talk about some of the evidence for the health benefits of a plant-based diet, the case for eating whole plant foods, some dietary transition tips, and give you some nutrition resources. Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. I'm a GP practicing here in Fitzroy, Melbourne, and a lifestyle medicine practitioner. I also provide video telehealth consultations to patients across Australia. Through my entity, Melbourne Lifestyle Medicine, I run a one-week live-in retreat program and a webinar online program. I also have another website with my partner, it's Plant-Based Health Australia, which is a nutrition resources website, and I'm on the advisory council of Doctors for Nutrition. And I'm an age group athlete and still going strong. After I finished medicine, I realised we had very little nutrition and lifestyle education, so I returned to university to do a graduate diploma in human nutrition. In more recent years, I undertook study to gain the international qualification of board-certified lifestyle medicine physician. Lifestyle medicine is the prescription of lifestyle changes to prevent, treat and reverse chronic disease and to enhance health. These include nutrition, stress management and emotional wellness, social connectedness, physical activity, sleep, apart from the odd earth tremor, and avoiding risky substance use. Nutrition is the keystone, in particular whole foods plant-based nutrition. And it's not controversial to recommend whole plant foods, like it's not controversial to recommend more whole grains, legumes, fruits and vegetables. And it's not controversial to recommend less processed food. And it's very well established that diets high in animal products are associated with chronic disease. Plant-based diets are considered nutritionally adequate by some of the world's largest nutrition organisations. Such as the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics in the USA, whose position statement is that appropriately planned vegetarian, including vegan diets, are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits, and that these diets are appropriate for all stages of the life cycle. As has already been said this evening, your diet has more impact on the environment than anything else you do. So when the Lancet Journal group of journals got together, had a commission, the Lancet Commission, and got together some the leading nutrition health experts, some agricultural specialists, environmental experts, and set them with the task of designing a diet that could feed 10 billion people sustainably in the year 2050. What do you think they came up with? This was a very plant-predominant diet. Their mission was not to make it a plant-predominant diet, but it just came out that way. I think they came out to the maximum of all their numbers. They said, well, we could give people 1 cup of milk a day, and we could give them 14 grams of beef a day. However, the Eat Lancet diet and the widely explained Mediterranean diets, these are public health strategies to eat more plants. And public health only needs to have small changes to find significant differences across a population. For example, a 20% reduction in cardiac events would be an impressive public health outcome. But a total failure for the individual I might see who still has a cardiac event. So I advocate big changes, i.e. a whole foods plant-based diet. Many of the clinical trials into nutrition only report minimal or small benefits because the changes made were too small. It's like a study into parachutes, finding that they don't work all that well because the parachutes were too small. But there are some studies that found stunning results, like the study published in 1990 by Dean Ornish, a randomized controlled trial of half the subjects going on a low-fat vegetarian diet, stress management, moderate exercise, and the majority of these patients who had severe heart disease on repeat angiograms over the 5-year period actually had a reduction in artery blockage. At this point in history, there were no statin cholesterol-lowering drugs either. Or the approach of Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, not a randomised controlled trial, people came to see him dying from severe heart disease. So he followed 200 patients in a row, 89% of which stuck to it, so people can do this. In that group, over 4 years, there was a 0.6% event rate, one small stroke. A much better result than I could give you with drugs and other medical procedures. But most of what we know about nutrition and health comes from the observational studies, large-scale research, tracking what people do, what they eat, and their health outcomes. And here are some of those listed. Generally, the findings of these are that red meat is associated with cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. That animal fat and animal protein are associated with increased death rates. That processed food is associated with worse health. That vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes are only ever associated with less disease and lower death rates. Such as in the Adventist 2 health study, this chart shows the incidence of diabetes in Adventists ranging from a moderate meat intake to vegan, showing a stepwise decrease in diabetes as the diet becomes more plant-based. So a vegan or plant-predominant diet could be an effective public health measure for Australia or USA to reduce the rate of diabetes. But note that the vegans in this study were still getting diabetes. They were eating a lot of processed food. We can do better than this. Another study, how can you study cancer in a randomised controlled trial? Low to moderate grade prostate cancer, where the treatment's often worse than watchful waiting. The men enrolled in the low-fat vegan diet, stress reduction and modest exercise, they actually had a reduction in the prostate cancer markers during the study, while the control group got worse. Their blood was more able to kill cancers in the petri dish. There were 500 genes up or down regulated in a way that was favourable to suppression of cancer. And these results are consistent with many other types of research on the effect of diet and cancer. Why does plant-based nutrition work so well? It's because nutrition regulates most of the homeostatic mechanisms that maintain health and lead to disease. Most diseases involve more than one of these mechanisms. So whole foods, plant-based and lifestyle has usually numerous opportunities to work in different ways. Plant-based diets are also very effective for sustained weight loss. The Broad study in New Zealand took a low socioeconomic regional area of New Zealand and enrolled subjects with diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and simply instructed them and coached them and gave them cooking demonstrations on how to cook a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet. This study recorded the greatest weight loss ever seen in a study of its type that involved no restriction of portion size and no exercise component. 11 kilograms at 6 months, kept off at 12 months. And patients with diabetes improved, and some of them went into remission. So I've just really touched the surface on the case for plant-based nutrition. Medical scientists among you might say, we want a randomised controlled trial. This is not always possible with lifestyle. For example, smoking. We have no randomised controlled trial to show that prolonged smoking will lead to lung cancer, any more than we have randomised trial to show repeated concussions to the head may eventually lead to dementia. I presume none of you wish to enrol in that study. So we've got numerous types of study here, and generally the information we look at is consistent with the known mechanisms of disease. The whole in whole foods plant-based diet. Plants, as grown, contain a symphony of nutrients, just the right balance of vitamins and minerals, just the right balance of protective phytonutrients, packaged in a matrix of fibre. You couldn't replicate this in an industrial site. And nutrition, when we look at it, really is infinitely complex. For example, thousands of phytonutrients interacting with dozens of essential nutrients. And you could throw your hands up to this complexity, or you could just say the solution is simple. Eat whole plant foods, Don't try and outsmart nature with isolated, concentrated nutrients. These protective phytonutrients I speak of are only found in abundance in minimally processed plant foods. All types of fibre, for example, are food for the gut microbiome, which is now receiving so much attention. A type of fibre found in oats and beans actually lowers cholesterol. The isoflavones in soy down-regulate the excessive estrogen signalling that's behind so many women's health problems. Lutein, an antioxidant in green leafy vegetables, protects the eye and brain. Sulforaphanes in cruciferous vegetables inhibit cancer growth. There are thousands more, many working synergistically, which makes a healthy diet as much or more about what you do eat than what you don't eat. However, I would recommend that you eat less of, that you minimise or avoid some foods: meat, chicken, fish, eggs, dairy. These contain many harmful components, well beyond the well-known cholesterol and saturated fat and lack of dietary fibre. Animal protein itself is a problem. It's qualitatively different to plant protein and plays a role in the pathogenesis of many of our chronic disease. And we don't need to eat animal products to meet our nutrient needs. So the power of whole foods plant-based nutrition. Whole plant foods have a powerful therapeutic effect in medicine because we have a symphony of nutrients working on a multitude of mechanisms versus the pharmaceuticals I've described that generally inhibit one process. And a whole foods plant-based diet has a wide breadth of effect. The same diet I might prescribe someone for diabetes will also help prevent their heart disease, will also reduce their cancer risk as a side benefit. And the same diet I might give to try and prevent heart disease can also be used to treat heart disease and sometimes reverse it. And it sounds like snake oil sales, but really the explanation is that it's a diet that best matches our anatomy and physiology. So here's a list of just a few of the conditions that can be treated with a whole foods plant-based diet, and not necessarily to the exclusion of conventional medicines and procedures. The last of which, the multi-morbidity patient, familiar to all medical doctors. This is the patient who has diabetes, heart disease, maybe osteoarthritis, maybe men's health problems, women's health problems, a plethora of conditions, and each condition has its own set of medications. And yet a whole foods plant-based diet and healthy lifestyle can benefit all of the underlying conditions this poor person has and reduce their need for medications and reduce side effects. Medicine seems to have become too focused on the diagnosis and of prescribing pharmaceuticals and procedures, seems to have forgotten how powerful nutrition and lifestyle can be. We should not just focus on disease, but also on the positive health benefits of healthy lifestyle, including a plant-predominant diet. People attending our one-week Live in Immersion event report in less than a week they have more energy, less brain fog, better mood, improved blood pressure, less bloating, improved sleep, and reduced arthritis pain. Relief from pain is one of the most consistently reported changes. At our Live-In events, we provide a 100% whole food plant-based diet, centered on starches, whole grains, legumes, starchy vegetables, the low-fat end of the plant food spectrum. Nuts and seeds are used in small amounts, and plenty of non-starchy veg and fruit, leafy green vegetables with every meal, for example, and no oil, margarine, or products with these, and low in salt. The energy density concept. Energy density on this chart here is the number of calories per weight of food. This explains why whole grains and legumes are our core food groups. You can see in the very far left that vegetables, are super healthy as they are, just don't pack enough calories to sustain us. So we need to move across that chart a bit to get to the potatoes, legumes, and whole grains. If we go too far across that chart and start pouring oil on our food, we will gain weight. And I guess nuts and seeds, as healthy as they are, we caution people with chronic disease and weight problems because they are very high in calories. So here are some examples of some whole foods plant-based meals. You can see every plate has plenty of vegetables, and some kind of healthy starchy food. We say eat more plants. Every step you take is good for your health and good for the planet. Focus on the adding in plant foods into your meals. Swap out some of the meat for grains and legumes. Swap out the dairy for plant-based alternatives. That's a very easy step. If you do go fully plant-based, there's only one supplement we recommend, and that's the B12 supplement. There are many resources available. For example, the Forks Over Knives documentary is well worth seeing if you haven't seen that. Their website, their recipe app. In Australia, the Doctors for Nutrition Health charity, bringing food back into healthcare is their slogan. They have a transition guide for patients and one that you can share with your doctor. In the US, the physicians, the PCRM, have many resources. And my own nutrition website, wholefoodsplantbasedhealth.com.au. So I recommend that you get support from some like-minded people, friends and family, if any of them will support you. Meetup groups across the world, the Plant Pure community, have their so-called pods. Within Australia, we have plant-powered meetup groups in each region. We had a terrific meetup on Sunday. It's really when we have a potluck, it's the best restaurant in town. There are also many Facebook groups. There's a large Australian ones for Aussies with about 17,000 members and many others. Myself and my partner and our team, we provide programs to help people transition. We provide an introductory webinar series, the Why, What and How of Whole Food Plant-Based Nutrition. It's a 4-part online program which comes with a PDF guide. We also run our 7-day lifestyle medicine retreat. We've got one in the beautiful Yarra Valley. We have one coming up in October and a couple scheduled for next year. I love these events. They don't pay as well as my day job, but I get satisfaction seeing people's aha moments and seeing their health transform. I also provide private lifestyle medicine consultations in person in Melbourne and via telehealth, which is unfortunately only able to be provided in Australia. So this was their website. Melbourne Lifestyle Medicine has information about lifestyle medicine in general and our programs. Whole Foods Plant-Based Health has nutrition information, many links to other resources. We try and steer people off our website, and Dr. Malcom Mackay is just a place to find me. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is my great pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks to our speakers. But before we do that, we have just about 3 or 4 minutes for any burning questions you might have. And please come forward to the microphone right here and keep the questions short, and we'll try and keep the answers short. I do have some announcements to make shortly, so please let's wrap up our time. Thank you. Our own wonderful District Governor, Welcome.
I have the distinct honor of having 2 of our district champions, Scott and Manish, and the rest of you. My question is, there are lots of what I call as industry groups, especially in the US, for the meat industry and other, I call non-vegetarian. The non-vegetarian to people mean meat eating. In this case, non-vegetarian means vegetarian loving. How do you overcome obstacles and also the funding they get to continue to support the meat industry?
It's not. Okay. It's very challenging. Dr. John McDougall says they have the money, but we have the truth. Their tentacles run deep in Australia as well. They're often hidden within other groups that are sort of front groups that pretend to be public interest groups but have industry behind them. My approach is just to keep telling the truth, to promoting the facts as I know it, and to hope that we can reach enough people and that eventually a ground-based movement can build and slowly eliminate these industries.
Are we good? Okay. Second question. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Could you comment on how the caloric cost of digestion affects basically based on cooking, affects the diet, and how much of a component is that cost factoring into weight loss and overall caloric decrease?
The caloric cost of digestion. You know, one of the great changes that happened in human evolution was the advent of cooking. The advent of cooking reduced the amount of digestive effort, improved the amount of digestion, enabled us to have a smaller gut and a bigger brain. It is difficult for a human to survive on raw foods. If you do, I would recommend still including a small amount of cooked foods. We found no culture in the world that has a completely raw-based diet, although it can be done. I would say that the nutrition, the digestive is quite a lot of calories consumed in it. The act of chewing is not all that many calories. Don't let anyone tell you that you use more calories chewing your celery than you get.
Great. Next question, please. We'll limit it to the last speaker, last question after that. One more.
Do you have any suggestions to make concerning the fact that when I buy vegetables in the United States, most of them come from soils that are depleted of nutrition, and the plants don't get it either? And where can I find better sources of nutritious plants that haven't been grown on soils that are just, I call it grown on steroids, where they put the fertilizer on and it grows and there's nothing in it?
Yeah, some of those vegetables I can never grow them that giant at home. Particularly in the United States, when I visit there, maybe it's because I more visit California, there's an awful lot of organic produce available. But I would comment on this and say that although our soil and our grown on steroids plants might contain somewhat reduced level of nutrients, we're very lucky in that we can have a plentiful supply of a huge variety of whole plant foods year round. So generally speaking, we can make it on what's available.
Thank you again for this presentation. I'm going to ask a Rotary specific, although it's a more general question. Thank you for bringing in the four-way test and how that fits with a plant-based diet. My question is the hypocrisy and how we can help. I turn off people because the events in our district, one of the biggest funding events is the Chicken Wing Festival. It's fabulous and people travel, but back to that four-way test, when I point out, how can we're Rotarians, we're Rotary, we live by the four-way test, yet we are raising money or having entertainment at the expense of animal cruelty and suffering and pain. I'm just wondering how to balance not being alienated from Rotarian society as and turning people off while saying it's not a match, in my humble opinion. Anyway, thank you for listening.
So, Phillip, what do you think?
I think it was the German poet Goethe who said that mankind is motivated not by reason but by ritual. I'll give you some numbers. By 2050, all our fisheries are going to be dead, and their lungs and the arteries of the earth. And I knew I was talking to Rotarians, and I didn't want to frighten anybody. But if any of my algorithms are correct, and they all are, they've been fact-checked by more people than you could imagine. If these algorithms that I've described are correct, and they are, it means no child under the age of 5 is ever going to reach retirement age. It is a mathematical impossibility. Now just let that sink in. So I look at the good work that Rotary does, But I got to tell you, I'm also, I build schools, I use my own money, of course, I don't have to respond to donors, I do what I want. Building schools is important, finding cures for childhood diseases is very important, but they're not going to have a planet to live on. And I know we're a very anthropocentric species. There are only 8 billion, as you say, of us, and we kill 2 billion animals every week. I would say that Rotary has such a fantastic opportunity to be on the right side of history. And to not take this opportunity would be such a tragedy. And it really needs thought leaders in it. Because I can tell you, in 10 years' time, the vegan movement and the animal rights movement is going to be so powerful. There really is nothing more powerful than this idea whose time has come. And Rotary does not want to be on the wrong side of history, because your membership will diminish, your constituency is going to change, and they'll find other places to do their good work, just like you're doing today. So I just say that the people here today have a great opportunity and responsibility to really make a big difference, and I hope you'll accept this challenge.
Next, Ambaree, you're on.
Yeah. Thank you, Philip, and thank you for asking that question. I've been to these dinners. I go to these dinners. I'm going to one today, where we are talking about world peace, but demonstrating it with absolutely nothing in terms of action. It hurts me, and the first instinct that I have is that I should not be a part of it. But I also understand that if I'm not a part of it, then there is nobody else who's going to be working on it. So I stay on, I go to these dinners, I ask for a plant-based dinner, even if I go to a beef-eating party raising funds for children. I will go there and ask for one plant-based meal, like I've asked today. The organizer has organized one plant-based meal for me. So I am just going to congratulate you for continuing to do that, because we have other people around the world in the Rotary world who are doing this. So you're definitely not alone, and you're making a great difference. Thank you for that. We have one more question. Yeah.
Okay, I'll allow one because it's you there.
Sorry, it's not a question. Just a quick statement. Our Rotary leaders are leading from the front. For those of you who don't know, our president, Jennifer Jones, is vegetarian.
Yes.
And even our Rotary Foundation trustee chair, Ian Risley, is vegetarian.
Yes.
So they are leading from the front.
Thank you. And we do have a support and endorsement for this event.
Manish,
So,
can I just,
all right,
just one statement?
30 seconds, Scott.
Yeah.
Time.
Our whole thrust is education. So when it comes to what's happening with market forces out there, if we can educate the populace on the real clear data that we presented here today on the value of plant-rich diets, then the market forces will change. Bottom line. There is one of our task force members in St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, who they did a fundraiser on the taste of St. Thomas, and it was all plant-based menu items that people would go around and do. So just keep educating and steering, the populace and the Rotary in the right direction, and we can be the engine of education.
Thank you all very much. I know it's a very lively Q&A, and we have very limited time in this 60-minute session. I just want to thank our distinguished speakers, Phillip Wollen and Dr. Malcom Mackay, for the time of my house, and on behalf of the Campus Guide Task Force of SRAG for sparing your time. And aren't we lucky? We have two such enlightened Melbournians right here. We didn't have to go far. We didn't have to pay airfares or any of that stuff. They just showed up here very enthusiastically, so I'm very grateful to them. Thank you for the inspiring lectures. Thank you to my co-organizers, Scott Nelson, who's I regard him as the voice of God and the conscience of plant-rich diets, and Ambaree Majumder, And behind them, we have a very large group of global Rotarians supporting the plant-rich diet task force very actively. And you can see all of their locations. I can't read them all, but they all work very hard to provide well-curated research information that is feeding into our plant-rich diet breakout session today. So I encourage you to go to the srag.org website, look up plant-rich diet task force, and all our information is on that website. You can download anything you want. And also the video from today's session is going to go up there at some point. I'll trust Scott to do it. So what remains is for me to thank you all in the audience for coming and being our champions and agents of change. Our room monitors, we have Evelyn and Annie, as well as our tech support staff, Sam and Sammy, believe it or not, for supporting this and a pretty flawless presentation board today. We are also starting a fellowship of vegan Rotarians. I have this pink sheet right here that Ambaree has prepared. Please sign up if you'd like to be counted on it and get some information. So I'm going to keep it right here and you can do that. And then finally, one more. There is several of these one-page sheets in the back of the room. Please feel free to pick up as many as you wish and take them to your clubs. Become agents of change. We've got to transform Rotary to do the right thing in the world, as you saw in the 4-way test. And this is our great start. So I thank you all for being here, my fellow breakout organizers and audience. The health of our planet does not get better by chance. It'll get better by change. Thank you for being here.
I'm staff supporting the session. Okay. I need to pull up. You are the organizer. Yeah. Okay. Can you stay contact with the people fill out the form? Yeah, sure. And also, I'm going to go back
Yeah. I'll be here anyway.
Yeah, I'll just wait. Okay.
Thank you.